Grab your Bibles, and I want you to go to Matthew chapter 1 and verse 21. Just sit there. It is going to look like I'm not going to pick you up. I promise you in about 20 minutes I'll pick you up. Thank you, worshipers. About 20 minutes I will pick you up. We'll acknowledge our visitors a little bit later. I want to talk for a moment about the presentation of Jesus Christ. Presentation of Jesus Christ. And I'm going to take you on a brief journey, and then you'll know where I'm picking you up. That's why you got to be ready. I'm only going to blow once. You got to get in, and you can fit in. Amen. In Genesis chapter 1, the word of the Lord says, and God says what? And so you notice that God had a master plan in Genesis. This is after he created the heavens, the earth, the water, separated day from night, all those things. And then the Lord says, let us make man. Now you notice that when God makes man initially, he makes man in his what? And his what? Which means that God made us that we might look like him. And God made us that we might act like him. Does that make sense? I always say that any parent, if you have kids, you may need more than one in this one, but if you have kids, your kids should either look like you or act like you, or both. All right. There's all right. Your kids. How many of you ever seen your kids do something? You say, "Boy, that's stuff I used to do," or maybe your wife said, "Boy, you acting just like your daddy," or maybe dad said, "Girl, you acting just like your mama," or whatever the case may be, or somebody, like we get visitors here, and they'll see me up here, and they'll see Mook all the way on the other end of the church, and he'd be all the way on the other end of the church. As a matter of fact, he'd be at Plymouth. He'd be at Plymouth. If they drove by Plymouth, I knew that was your son. Because your kids should either, what, look like you or act like you. When Jesus created man, had the idea of man, had the concept of man, he had the concept of man that we might look like him and that we might act like him. When God looks from heaven, he wanted to see little versions of himself in the earth realm. Does that make sense? And in Genesis chapter 2, we have that. We literally have Adam, who God literally gives the same authority that he has from chapter 1 into chapter 2. The Bible says everything that Adam named, or whatever he called it, that's what it was named. That's the exact same power that God had in Genesis chapter 1 when he named stuff. This is the water. This is going to be night. This is going to be light. This is going to be day. Whatever Adam chapter 2 called stuff, that's what it was named. Does that make sense? And so God made man in his image and his likeness that we might be like him, that we might look like him. And everything was going well. Everything was going well. Can you believe it or not? In Genesis chapter 2, there was no cancer. There was no diabetes. There was no heartache. There was no stress. Does that make sense? Everybody was doing well. Everything was good. Everything was looking good until we get to Genesis chapter 3. Everybody say chapter 3. In Genesis chapter 3, the Bible says, now the what? What? Of the field which the Lord God had made. And he said unto what? Or to them, for the lack of time, he said unto them. So after Satan, or after man has a conversation with Satan, everything goes downhill from there. Be careful talking to Satan. Is that all right? Yeah. So after this conversation with Satan, we know they ate of the forbidden tree, And God now, for the first time, looks from heaven and he sees man, but man doesn't look like his image. And man doesn't look like his likeness. God looks from heaven now, he looks down on earth, and he says, oh my God, what in the world is going on? Genesis chapter 3 literally says they could hear, listen to this, his voice walking in the coolness of the garden. How do you hear a voice walking? When God approaches them in Genesis chapter 3, verse 11, somebody say verse 11. He said unto them, who told thee what? He said to man, he says, what happened? You no longer look like me. Who told you you were naked? Or who took your pureness away? Who told you things that I didn't teach you? Who changed you from the image that I created you in into this image that it's very difficult for me to understand? Hast thou eaten of the tree whereof I've commanded thee that thou what? And we all know Genesis chapter 3 that they said, yeah, Eve blamed who? Adam. Adam blamed who? God blamed what? All of them. Eve, Adam, and the serpent. Because sin is never somebody else's fault. Sin is and will always be what? My fault. Is that all right? So sin enters the world. Man no longer looks like the image of God. And God says, he makes a critical decision in Genesis chapter 6. Critical decision, Genesis chapter 6. Somebody say chapter 6. Chapter 6 verse 5, it says, and God saw what? So God now, he looks at man, and the Bible says, and he saw the wickedness of man that was great in the earth, and that every what? Imagination. He looks from earth now, and he does not see man in his image. He sees man now in his imagination. Man has slid from the image of God to the imagination of himself. Be careful when you slide from the image of God into the imagination of yourself. Well, what happens when that takes place? Well, when that takes place, the imaginative thought of his heart was only evil what? Continually. When a man slides from the image of God to imagination, he begins to do evil continually because he justifies within himself why he's doing it. He tells himself, I can do this because I can. I can do this because I don't need God. Man, for the first time, does not have God regulating his standards. He does not have God regulating his rules. He does not have God bringing him into order and bringing him into subjection. Why? Because he's letting his imagination run him. When God is not the head of your life, be careful. Because you will eventually succumb to your imagination. Your imagination, we learned in Bible class, invent things to do. Because housing your imagination is not only the creativity to pull it off, but the justification to justify why you did it in the first place. So we create sin. God looked at that, and he makes a critical decision. He sees man no longer in his image. And in Genesis chapter 6, verse 6, it says what? What does that mean? He regretted making us. That should make you sit up in your seat and say, oh my God. There's a moment where God, the master of the universe, the creator of all things, the beginning and the end, had a moment where he said, gosh, I wish I have never new for some people because we don't see this side of God. They don't preach this side of God anymore. It's all about cars and stuff, and there's a place for that. But understand, there's another side of God who gets eerily irritated when we do not look like his image. The Bible says it repented the Lord that he made man on the earth. And here's what I want you to take away from you tomorrow and the next day, the next time you see it. It grieved him where? Who grieved who? All right, so mama may not say nothing. Daddy may not say nothing. Your husband may not say nothing. Your wife may not say nothing. But when we see it, who does it grieve? And if it grieves God's heart, so he makes his decision. Everybody say verse 7. And the Lord said what? What does he say? I'm out. Done. Taking him out. Man that I created, whatever you create should never become bigger than he who created it. Of all the things God created, the only one he regretted creating is us. He says, I'm going to destroy man from the face of the earth. But God is so good that even when he's mad at us, somebody always finds grace. Preach, right? I didn't have time to say thank God for grace. He destroys the earth first time by water. But Noah found grace in his eyes. And we tell him, y'all get in the ship 2 by 2. And after I destroy the world first time, I want you all to come out and let's start this thing over. Let's start from scratch. And so God destroys the earth, and Noah does exactly what God tells him to do. The flood comes, the flood leaves, and Noah, it's supposed to be a fresh start. The very thing that he regretted creating prior to the flood is supposed to be reinvigorated and refreshed and revived post the flood. And when God sees this in Genesis chapter 13, he sees something else. Says what? This is after the flood. What do you do when you start over? And what you started over from gets worse. What do you do when you start from scratch and you find yourself in the same place you was before you started over from scratch? God sees the world look the same way it did before he destroyed it the first time. I've often said this about the resurrection. After Jesus died on the cross, rose from the grave, he came to a world that looked just like the world he just died for. Things are so bad, Deacon Tate, that God said in Genesis chapter 18, the Lord says, I tell you what, if I can find in Sodom, what? Just 50. If I can find 50, he says, 50 righteous within the city, what? How many was he looking for? Just 50. And then he said, no. If I just find 20, says I'll spare the whole. No. If I could just find 10. I wonder in this place if he could find just 10. We'll say, for God I'll live. It's just 10. 10 in here who live right? Is it just 10 in here who will wake up tomorrow, whether they have something or not, and still say, thank you, Jesus? Is there just 10 in here who won't lose their mind when they lose their stuff? He couldn't find 10. He destroys Sodom and Gomorrah. Now hear you, Mama Carter's pitiful. He destroys Sodom and Gomorrah. And then, so then Genesis takes us on the slide. The seed of sin has been planted. We see it in Isaac and Jacob and Esau. We see it come through the lineage of Abraham. We see it come through Joseph and his brothers. They hated him. Brothers hated his brother. They tried to kill him. And then when we get to Exodus, you think things, the word Exodus literally means exit, to exit from a thing. Exodus, but they find themselves in Exodus trapped in the same place that they were in. And so then in Exodus, now there rose up a what? Stop there. Don't read no more. There rose a what? New beginnings, right? Don't read ahead. New king, new things, new king, new things. Everything's going to be good now, right? New king. There rose a new king over Egypt, what? Which knew not Joseph. Because the king did not know Joseph. The king did not know the God of Joseph. And because the king did not know the God of Joseph, he allowed sin to come back into the camp. It wasn't long that idol worship began to amass. It wasn't long before sin began to run rampant. Somebody say presentation of Jesus Christ. Let's get right. Things are going haywire now. And so what God begins to do is he begins to send various presentations to deliver man from his sin. Now why would you do this? 2 Corinthians, I'm jumping, says, to wit that God was in Christ doing what? Reconciling. Not imputing what? Assigning or what? What? Somebody say, thank God for Jesus. When he could have wiped us out again, he was reconciling himself so that the sins we commit wouldn't be counted against us. Somebody say justification. You know what justification is? Justification is when God says, I'm going to treat you just like you didn't do it. I wonder if I got 10 people, just 10, who will shout over the fact that even though you sin, God justifies us and treat us just like we didn't do it. High five and they will say, thank God for it. He begins to send various presentations to redeem man. He sends Abraham. And through Abraham, we're supposed to learn the covenant. He says, maybe I'll get man to live right through the covenant or the fact that they know I'm going to bless their seed. Tell you that didn't work. He sends Moses and he says, Moses, perhaps now let's use some rules or the 10 Commandments. Let's see if we can live right through a set of rules. Their whole point has been they didn't know what I expect. Let's give them some rules. And so he gave us 10 Commandments through Moses. Somebody say that didn't work. He gives us Joshua. And Joshua ushers us into the promised land. And it is from the promised land we're supposed to see that the grass is greener with God than it is without him. But how many of you know even in the promised land they became them old selves? Promises didn't work. Then he gave us David. David leads us through worship. And we're supposed to learn through David that through worship we can have continuity with God. And we can smell the fragrance of his aroma. But somebody say that didn't work. He gives us Solomon. Solomon gives us wisdom. And it is through the wisdom that we find that life in and of itself is not worth living if you cannot live it with God. Touch your neighbor and say that didn't work. So then he gives us prophets, minor prophets, major prophets. He gives us prophets like Hosea. And he tells Hosea, you can't marry that woman. I want you to marry a prostitute. Why a prostitute? Because I want them to see what life is like, that I love them in spite of the fact that they cheat on me. And he's giving us Isaiah. Isaiah wasn't perfect. He said, my lips are unclean. But he gives us Isaiah so that we can know that in spite of having unclean lips, we can still prophetically be connected to who God is. He gives us Malachi. He gives us Jonah, Micah. He gives us prophet after prophet, presentation after presentation. Says, let me keep trying. And all of the prophets all come to the same question. In Psalms chapter 8, verse 4, God, if they so bad, what is man? That thou art mindful of them. Why do you keep reconciling? If they're not doing what you want them to do, what are they? If they're the one creation you regret, what is it about them that makes you go back again, and again? What is man that thou art mindful? Somebody say, thank God for Jesus. All these presentations come to the sum total and the essence of who he is. And God attempts to answer this question in Jeremiah 31. He says, behold, the days come, says the Lord, that I will make what? Come on, say it like you know how to read. Somebody say, new covenant with the house of Israel and with the house of Judah. But even the promise of a new covenant does not bring us into new lifestyles. Man continues to do what it wants to do. And in the strange twist of events, when we get to Malachi chapter 3, verse 14, man has flipped the script on God. And man says to God, what's the use? You feel you putting up with us, we putting up with you. What's the use of serving you? What have we gained? I know there's 12 people in here who said that. What have we gained by obeying your commandments? Malachi is the last book in the Old Testament. Think about how man thinks about God in the last book of the Old Testament. It must have irked God because the last scripture of the last book in the Old Testament, God says, all right, I will come and do what? That's the very last scripture in Malachi in the Old Testament. So God, last thing he says is, I'll smite the earth again then. You want it like that? Okay. And if you have your Bible somewhere in your Bibles, depending on how much you paid for it, there's a blank spot. Then that blank spot, though you flip it in milliseconds, 400 years have gone by. And what emerges from 400 years of darkness and frustration, what emerges from the contextual argument of God, we don't need you, God, I don't need you, is God going in his chambers, thinking this thing through, not for him, but for us. And what comes on the other side of those 400 years is, and I'm done, somewhere I must have missed the mark. I thought you'd shout right there. At least I did in my research, but we'll get there. It's just Jesus. And we treat Jesus how they treated him when he first showed up. The Bible says there was no room in the inn. In spite of the fact that Jesus was prophetically declared to come, they did not make room for him when he came. And I don't know who I'm talking to in here, but I believe there are about 50 or 60 of you who love the Lord, but you have not made room for him to be head of your life. God goes in his chambers and he comes up with the concept of presenting Jesus. And before we move on, I just want you to remember what he said in the last verse of the Old Testament, which is, I will smite the earth with a curse. And if Jesus hypothetically is our curse, thank God for Jesus. Something made God give us another chance. Something made God say, I love him too much to destroy him and to just wipe him out. Though I said I'm going to smite the earth, something in God said I'm going to give them another chance. God presents Jesus. Now here's what's interesting about the presentation of Jesus. John picks it up, and John says, you got to catch what's interesting about this presentation. John says, John chapter 1, in the beginning, what beginning? The same beginning in Genesis chapter 1, when he's saying, let us make man in our image and our likeness. Let us make man. Let us. No, we're just talking about God. Let us. In that beginning, in the beginning was what? The Word. And the Word was. Read this like you know how to read what? And the Word. God says the presentation of Jesus is about me coming down to earth, seeing how they live. God literally, John chapter 14, and the Word was made and did what? Somebody say, thank God for Jesus. God put on skin, came down here to earth. I said, since I can't get you to live right from heaven to earth, let me come to earth and get you to live right from earth to heaven. I thought y'all was shocked about right there. Let's keep pushing. Let's keep chugging along. Choo choo. Here comes the train. And so God comes here, and God comes here through the form of flesh, and he comes here for himself, by himself, and he comes here as Jesus Christ because he does not want any of us to say it is easy to live right if you're in heaven looking down here. So God says, all right, let me come down here to earth and show you how to live right. And the Bible says we do not have a high priest who was not touched with the feelings of our infirmities, which means he sweated in our sun, he got cold in our cold, he shivered in our rain, he had to go through the same stuff we went through, and yet the Bible says he knew no sin. Somebody say, thank God for Jesus. He wasn't allowed to come down here with a secret cell phone. He wasn't allowed to come down here in the power of the Holy Ghost. Not yet. He was not allowed to come down here and go to school with the Holy Ghost on his shoulder. He was not allowed to go to school with the supernatural wisdom of Solomon. He was not allowed to come down here and operate in the supernatural worship of David. He was not allowed to come down here in the mastery of the Ten Commandments. He had to come down here like you and I, and that's why he does not get the Holy Ghost until he is started, because God wants us to know that up until that moment you can live right by how you commit yourself to God and not by no supernatural principle that makes you do. Touch your neighbor and say, thank God for Jesus. So Jesus comes down here, God comes down here as Jesus in the form of flesh. And when he comes down here, the Bible says, and I love it, he comes in grace and in truth. Somebody say grace and truth. Touch your name and say you need them both. This is the problem with the church, because too many times the church preach truth. Gotta preach truth. But where is your grace? Teach the responsibility. We don't have the erroneous responsibility of just preaching truth. We have to preach truth and grace. Truth is we messed up. Who am I talking to in here? Do I have 50 people in here who messed up? Touch your high five your neighbor and say, that's the truth. That's the truth. But grace woke you up this morning. This ain't everybody. Somebody, truth is you did something last night. You should have done. Don't raise your hand. Keep them down. But grace still got you up this morning off your bed of affliction. If God, through Jesus, came down here and just dealt with us in just truth, we'd be gone a long time ago. But I thank God that as God looks at me through truth, he also processes me through his amazing grace. I dare you high five your neighbor and say, thank God for Jesus. You'll do better. In your relationship, you can deal with truth and grace. So Jesus come down here in the spirit of grace and truth. And the second thing, in the presentation we learned about Jesus, I just told you this, they had no room for him. They brought forth the firstborn son and wrapped him in swaddling clothes and laid him in a manger because what? Touch your neighbor, say, make room for Jesus. I don't know who I'm talking to in here, but somebody in here, I know you say you go to church, but you got to make room for Jesus. You do not make room for Jesus if you can stand in line on Black Friday, but can't come to church on Good Friday. I don't know who I'm talking to. You're not making room for Jesus if you have more money under the tree than you put in church all year long. I'm going to lose my audience right here. You are not making room for Jesus. If tomorrow is about you and not about the birthday of Jesus Christ, they did not make room for him. And John picks it up and says, I know they didn't, because in John chapter 1 he says he was in the world and the world was made by him and the world knew him not. I love this 11. He came unto his own and his own. That's a bit antithetical, because there's no room for Jesus would suggest Jesus is not about substance, and yet his birthday, ironically now, is all about substance. It's all about the stuff. It's all about commercialization. It's all about retail. Where did that come from? When Jesus was born, he was born in scarcity. He was born with very little things, and yet, if you look at Christmas now, Christmas is all about what I can get. Can I go deeper? There was no room for him in the end. And then God, as only God can in his sense of humor, he brings Jesus into the world through a couple that ain't even married. You think he found a couple that's been married for some years. He brings Jesus through an unmarried couple. Yeah, and then even though he's born in Bethlehem, his parents are from the hood. They from Nazareth. Can't any good thing? So let's reverse and come into context. God brings Jesus through an unmarried couple from the hood. God, oh my God, how could you do that? Because God wants us to know, I'm done. That it is not how you start. High five your neighbor and say, it's how you finish. I don't care how you grew up. I don't care if you grew up in the hood. I don't care if your grandfather was a drunk, your daddy was a drunk, your stepdaddy was a drunk. I don't care how you start. God wants us to know it ain't where you start. High five your neighbor and say, it's where you finish. And listen, young girl, I know you had 2 babies out of wedlock. It ain't where you start. It's how you finish. I know you spent some time in jail, but I came to tell you it ain't where you start. It's how you finish. High five your neighbor, say, thank God for grace and such extremes. Because Isaiah chapter 9 verse 6 says, unto us. Hold on, Twan, I ain't it's Christmas. I'm normally looking for you. Now you're looking for me. That's it. He said, unto us a child is born, and a son is given. Here, listen. And the government shall be upon his shoulders. So God has to bring Jesus in a way that's outside of the system that he's trying to change. You can't change a system if you're part of the system that's corrupt. So God brings him through an obscure way so that when the government is on his shoulders, he is anointed enough to carry it. The things that have happened in your life, God has brought you through that means. And I know you've argued with God on occasion. Why me, God? God has brought you through that because the very thing that you're going to carry is the very thing you're going to be anointed to carry. Somebody else would drop what you're trying to carry, but God has brought you every tear, every sweat, every argument. God has brought you through that thing so that when you carry that thing, you and you alone are anointed enough to carry it. High five your neighbor, say, I got this one, I got this one. There's some of you who came through drugs. I ain't good at drugs. I lose my mind. But God kept you and sustained you because you are anointed to carry that thing. God brought some of you through jail. Jail will break me down. But God brought you through that thing, oh God, because God wants you to know that you are anointed to carry that thing. High five three people and say, I got this. Come on, tell them I got this. You can't handle my story. I got this. You don't know what it's like to be molested, but I do. I got this. You don't know what it's like to be falsely imprisoned. I do. I got this. You don't know what it's like to almost be dead, and the doctor say I can't do nothing else for you. I've been through that. High five your neighbor and say, I got this. If you presented Jesus through obscurity, if you presented Jesus through the lack of resources, if you presented Jesus through an unmarried couple from the hood, what did you give them that will let us know he's worthy to be praised? Bob, coming to you. Matthew 1:21 says, and his name shall be called Jesus. What that mean? Philippians 2:9-10. I didn't give him a great house. I didn't bring him here in style. I didn't bring Jesus in a limousine. I didn't bring him here in fame. I didn't bring him here in the latest clothes. I didn't bring him here in the latest style. But what I did was ensure that I gave him something. That money came back. In Philippians 2:9-10 it says, I'm going to give him a name that's above every name. At the name of Jesus. Would you high five your neighbor and say, neighbor, there's something about his name. So when Jesus come down here, he don't have a lot of money. He's born in a manger. They wrap him in swaddling clothes. It doesn't look like he's much of a king. But Jesus brings him down here and he gives him a name that's above every name. And it teaches teaches us that whatever you're missing in life, if you can call on the name of Jesus, touch your neighbor and say, neighbor, there's something about the name. And how many of you know that whenever you call on the name of Jesus, something begins to happen? Is there anybody in here that's ever called on his name? I ain't talking to everybody. If you ever called on his name and he worked that thing out for you, just high five your neighbor and say, man, I called on his name and he came to my rescue. The next time you're sick, I dare you to call on his name. The next time you're broke, I dare you to call on his name. Because Jesus gotta respond to his name. He may not respond to your money. He may not respond to what you drive. But if you ever call on his name, won't he come to your rescue? Just high five your neighbor again and say, neighbor, I think I'll try that. Let me think of something that I've gone through this year. And from the day forward, I'm going to use his name. And when you use his name, God will turn that thing around. Is that all right in here? Can I close here now? But God gave him a name. That at the name of Jesus, every knee got to bow and every tongue got to confess that he is Lord. Is there anybody in here that knows that Jesus is Lord? I've been broke and he's still Lord. I had money, but he's still Lord. I had a car and he's still Lord. I had to walk sometime, but he's still Lord. Am I talking to anybody in here? Just high five your neighbor and say, neighbor, he's Lord. Can I close him down? Ain't he all right? I feel all right in here. Just call on his name. Come on, give God glory for his name. Come on, give God glory for his name. People say something about his name. Something about his name. Nothing in life works without the name of Jesus. And yet, you pray at your job and won't close it out in Jesus' name. You get up tomorrow and open presents and won't stop for a second and say, thank you, Jesus. Come on, touch your neighbor again and say, make room for him, make room for him, make room for him. Make room for him, make room for him, make room for him. God presented Jesus in an obscure way so that you and I would understand that if you wasn't born a certain way, you can still make it. I ain't talking to everybody, but how many of you wasn't born with a silver spoon in your mouth? Some of you, your last name, you connected to Ford. Your father's last name is Apple. Your uncle's last name is General Motors. But how many of you know my uncle last name wasn't Ford? I ain't talking to everybody here. Your uncle ain't the president of General Motors. When you went to school, you had to fill out financial aid papers. Who am I talking to in here? You got your shoes from Kingsway. Who am I talking to? In here, I ain't talking to everybody. I just lost half my audience there. Everybody know about Questions. Where my Question folks at? I hear somebody saying Farmer Jacks. You don't know about no good fellas. If that good fella box didn't come, oh well. But how did you make it? How did you make it? How did you make it? How did you make it, Dad? Come on, touch your neighbor and say, what's the sweetest name I know?